What if I told you that Ferrari could have broken the code that kept them away from a championship for more than 15 years? What if the secret is not in the aerodynamic design, but in a technical decision that defies all modern logic? Stay, because this is not a simple car presentation. This is the beginning of a silent revolution. On January 22, 2026, while winter still covered the surroundings of Maranello in silence, Ferrari revealed to a select group of engineers, executives, and cameras its car for the most uncertain season in recent times, the SF26. The event was sober, almost routine. A car rolling through Fiorano, the familiar sound of a hybrid engine adjusted to the new rules, the drivers waving, and little else. Nothing that at first glance suggested a technical earthquake. But what was happening in parallel behind the scenes of Formula One was the complete opposite of normality. The real story was not in what was shown to the press, but in what was not said in that presentation. While the media speculated about the retro decoration or the shapes of the front wing, confidential reports were already circulating in the paddock. Technical leaks, data sheets, internal simulations, they all pointed to a single fact. Ferrari had developed a car with such strong mechanical and structural stability that the rest of the teams were forced to completely reevaluate their own interpretations of the new regulations. What the leaked documents revealed was even more surprising. The SF26 wasn't just a car that complied with the 2026 regulations. It was a car that seemed to understand it. The data showed a consistency of balance, a precision of downforce under variable conditions, and above all, a thermal efficiency in the power unit that exceeded even the team's own optimistic scenarios. That efficiency did not come from nowhere. It was a consequence of an internal redesign of the combustion system that, as we will see later, defied decades of consensus in Formula One engine engineering. And this generated an immediate reaction. Within days, engineers from rival teams began asking for internal meetings. Key questions were arising in the factories of Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, and Aston Martin. What exactly did Ferrari do? How did you manage to isolate the dynamic behavior in a completely new car? And why didn't your simulator data show the typical problems of adaptation to the new tires, the new MGUK layout, or the extra weight of the new regulations? The steel alloy used by Ferrari is designed to withstand higher combustion temperatures than any material previously used. This allows the pressure inside the chamber to be increased, improving thermal performance, that is, obtaining more useful energy for each drop of fuel burned. Preliminary calculations by Maranello's technical department estimate a benefit of up to 13 horsepower. At first glance, this might seem like a modest figure. But in Formula One, where a single tenth can define championships, that margin translates to about a quarter of a second per lap in ideal conditions. A competitive abyss. But that's not all. The real conceptual leap is in how this innovation unlocks other areas of the car's performance. Thanks to the greater thermal insulation capacity of this alloy, Ferrari can operate at more stable temperatures throughout the racing cycle. This reduces the need for auxiliary components to cool or protect the power unit, which in turn frees up space and reduces weight in other areas of the car, allowing for better mass distribution, a lower center of gravity, and more efficient aerodynamics. However, it's not just a question of benefits. This change comes with monumental challenges. Steel is much denser than aluminum, which could penalize the engine with higher weight and a less favorable position within the chassis. This is where Ferrari shows that it has not only taken risks, it has thought about every millimeter. Thanks to its technological alliance with Renishaw, a leading additive manufacturing firm, Ferrari has introduced advanced metallic 3D printing techniques. This has allowed them to build cylinder heads with internal structures designed in detail to maximize rigidity and minimize weight. We are not talking about simple mass cuts. We are talking about internal cellular structures that can only exist thanks to the direct printing of metal. Geometries impossible to replicate with traditional casting or machining methods. This level of precision not only offsets the additional weight of a steel, but allows them to adjust the thermal behavior of each section of the component based on its exposure to heat and stress. Denser sections where dissipation and reinforcement are needed, hollow or lightened structures in low-impact areas. Each cylinder head is, in essence, a work of adaptive microengineering. And most impressive, it is replicable with industrial consistency, something essential in an era where only 4 power units are allowed per season. What Ferrari has created is not just a new cylinder head, it is a declaration of intent, a sign that they are willing to do what others do not dare to try, to change the focus of development from the aerodynamic to the thermodynamic. to build an advantage from the very core of the car, not just from its outer shell. And it is at this point where the rest of the grid begins to look with concern. Because if Ferrari manages to consolidate this advantage in reliability, and if its performance predictions are met under real racing conditions, we would be facing an innovation as influential as the Braun GP double diffuser in 2009 or the McLaren F-duct system in 2010. Is not an incremental improvement. It is a turning point. One that, as the paddock is already beginning to suspect, could change the rules of the game forever. Every innovation with disruptive potential in Formula One is accompanied by an inevitable shadow risk. And Ferrari knew it from the first day. It decided to challenge the dogma of contemporary engineering. The introduction of steel cylinder heads was not met with cheers within the team. On the contrary, it generated an intense internal debate between engineers, material specialists, and those responsible for reliability. The dilemma was as simple as it was brutal. What is gained in performance? Can it be sustained throughout a season that demands perfection? The density of the steel is not a minor detail. Although Ferrari managed to reduce its impact with additive manufacturing, its use increases thermal stress on neighboring components, modifies the internal inertias of the engine, and affects structural vibration throughout the chassis. Steel can withstand higher temperatures, yes, but in doing so, it transfers some of that heat to the rest of the system, putting a strain on radiators, sealing systems, lubricants, and even ERS flow management. And this is where one of the key names in this story appears, AVL. The Austrian firm, one of the world leaders in hybrid engine engineering, was called to Maranello after an alarm signal. Ferrari had built prototypes with steel cylinder heads, but the reliability data was ambiguous. They didn't fail, but they didn't give guarantees either. At this critical point, Ferrari did not allow itself to improvise. They decided to paralyze the development of the aluminum version initially maintained as Plan B, and poured all their resources into resolving the bottlenecks of the new combustion system. For that, they needed more than calculations. They needed to replicate extreme conditions. And it was precisely AVL who implemented a dynamic simulation system of accelerated thermal cycles, subjecting the cylinder heads to loads higher than those of any real race, to identify fatigue patterns and possible structural failures. The result of these tests was not a simple, yes it works. It was a revelation. The cylinder heads not only survived stress, but did so with linear degradation behavior. This is fundamental in modern Formula One, because the worst thing a team can have is not a failure, but an unpredictable failure. What is catastrophic is what happens without warning, which ends with an engine exploding in the middle of the straight without having shown any prior signs, which forces you to abandon without a defense option. Ferrari discovered that its cylinder heads, being manufactured with an internal architecture optimized through 3D printing, did not fail suddenly. Instead of fracturing, they gradually lost efficiency, allowing telemetry sensors to identify performance loss before it turns into a disaster. In an era where the regulations only allow for combustion engines per driver per season, this is more than an advantage. It is a competitive safety net. And it was precisely in one of those tests when the final decision was made. Ferrari was not only going to use steel cylinder heads, he was going to build his entire year 2026 on them. They abandoned the aluminum version altogether. They burned their ships. They bet everything on steel. And they did so with the conviction that, for the first time in many years, they were not improvising, they were leading. The impact of a technical decision in Formula One is not measured only in horsepower or tenths per lap. It is measured in fear. And that is exactly what began to be felt in the paddock just a few days after the first data from the SF26 began to circulate. Because it was not just that Ferrari had designed a competitive car, but that it seemed to have done so based on a logic that others did not see coming. To understand the magnitude of what happened, you have to consider the context of the category. The 2026 season is not just any change. It's a total regulatory reset. New weight distribution, new balance between combustion and electric, redesigned tires, higher mass limits, and completely different aerodynamic demands. The teams knew that whoever interpreted this transition best could dominate the next technical cycle. But no one expected that Ferrari, a team that had been without titles for more than 15 years, would be the one to take the first accurate step. Rivals began to perceive the change not only in data, but in attitude. Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, during private testing at Fiorano, showed unusual composure. Both known for their detailed and demanding approach, agreed on something that is rarely heard after the first kilometers of a new car: predictable, stable, balanced from the first lap. For those who know the cryptic language of Formula One drivers, that is almost an anthem of confidence. Will this be the beginning of a new red domain? Or are we, once again, facing a mirage that is mechanically perfect but strategically vulnerable? Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.